What's going on, guys? Uh, just gonna be recording my thoughts on the Omens of Destruction tier list for all the new Khorne stuff. Um, God, it's been really nice to get the new DLC stuff. Khorne has immediately become a much better faction. Um, of the three, probably the one that benefited the most, just because of the versatility that a lot of these units bring to the table. There are some pretty good options here to mix up some matchups that have really made it difficult for Khorne to most capably perform in a tournament format, especially in an SFT, where you're more likely to run into those factions that Khorne might just struggle with, and you wouldn't really normally have counterplay. Now you do. So we've already seen some people bringing them in and absolutely dominating tournaments, with Oishi being the most notable of them. But this is just my personal experience. This is what I personally think and feel about the new units. You might be wondering why I put the Blood Reaper up here. Blood Reaper is basically an entirely new unit. I mean, you never saw Blood Reapers to begin with. Now, I would really like to be able to talk about them because they are very interesting. Definitely not just an afterthought unit anymore. At least not in my experience. But just to kick it off, we'll start with the Lords, and the Lord options are pretty solid. Skull Taker is definitely up in the upper levels of a quality unit. Just an incredibly tanky Lord on the Blood Shrine. Almost impossible to kill for what he does, which is just roll around on the shrine, beat up on elite infantry, or even chaff of any and all types, giving huge buffs to everything around him. You know, he does have. Let me 1 second. Let me pull up the game real quick. He does obviously have the Totem of Endless Bloodletting, which all Blood Shrines get, but he also has Revel in Slaughter, which gives +8 leadership and melee attack too. Another excellent passive buff to everything around him, only in a 35-meter radius, so it's really only where he is that he's giving that buff, which keeps him in check. He'd be insane if he gave it in a much larger radius. Like 55 meters would be pretty busted for all the buffing he can provide for the units around him. He can make even a basic Marauder unit fairly capable at beating up on infantry that are a tier above them. They would still struggle against armor, but say you have Skull Taker just giving the buffs and not even actively supporting in a fight against, say, like a Gore Herd. Marauders will actually trade evenly into them, whereas before it would have been an absolute slaughter fest. So you can send Skull Taker around to just buff stuff up in the front line and give them a little bit of extra combat prowess. And then, as I said, he's in his own right very capable at beating down infantry. Cloak of Skulls in matchups against like very heavy missile pressure, gives him the 20% resistance to all missile damage. Extra armor, which gives him up to 155 armor, which is really crazy. Once you get over 130, then you're talking about the exponential gains in the amount of damage that it mitigates. So he is not invulnerable to base weapon damage, but pretty close. He is not going to worry about fighting on top of spears under just about any circumstances when Cloak of Skulls is active. And he also gets immune to flanking, which means he's got melee defense all the way around him, and his melee defense of 35 isn't great when he's on the shrine, but that's certainly not terrible either. And Slayer's Sword is a situational item. It does come with the weakened effect on it. For 22 seconds, he also gets more weapon damage and the 24 melee attack. So he becomes a really good duelist just on the shrine with Slayer's Sword active, and he weakens whatever target he's fighting. So if you're going up against High Elves, per se, Slayer's Sword, Cloak of Skulls, not to mention Bloody Onslaught, all very good items to bring on him in that one theoretical matchup, because, pop Slayer's Sword, if a dragon lands on him, he weakens the dragon, he beats up on the dragon too. You can pop Bloody Onslaught to make that fight even more favorable, and then Bloody Onslaught in general is an item. 75-meter range, 38-second duration is a long time, and it lowers armor as well. So, heavily armored infantry or monstrous infantry or anything, really, suddenly becomes much, much easier to deal with when you've got this guy rolling around and just popping all of those items and being an absolute nuisance. He is by far the strongest of the Lord options that you've got that are new. I will do another video where I talk about the entire roster, and we'll measure him up in that video against the other Lords that are available. But as it stands for the DLC, easy A tier, not broken, but incredibly powerful and difficult to deal with. Alright. Next up on the list, we do have the Bloodspeaker. The Bloodspeaker is a unit that I am pretty divided on. I've done a lot of experimentation with this guy. He's not a bad Lord per se. He doesn't do the usual Khorne shtick, though, of being a good duelist. Every other Khorne Lord is good in combat, and the Bloodspeaker is just not. He's quite poor at actual melee combat. Does tend to get beat up pretty badly and is pretty vulnerable. I think that there are applications where he excels, and I don't think that he's useless, but I think this is going to be the Lord that people are going to have to put a lot of work into figuring out where he performs best. The thing that I've noticed that he does really well is support like hyper elite units, like Skull Crushers, Heralds of Khorne's Fury. He can buff up, Wrathmongers and Skull Reapers pretty nicely. That's probably the thing he does best. He has some very nice abilities. He's got the Wild Abandon, which gives 40 melee attack, does reduce melee defense, but also imbues Cannot Die. That's 25 seconds, 100-meter range, 90-second cooldown. An incredible ability. Just gives him obscene amounts of utility in terms of the amount of damage that he can assist a unit in pumping out, which is why Skull Crushers benefit so much from him. They can take a fight against a very powerful unit. You pop this on them, and they'll just absolutely ice whatever they're going into combat with. Really impressive performance out of those guys when you've got this ability on them. He's got Pilgrimage of Skulls, which imbues Unbreakable and reduces Vigor on units. It's a 35-meter effect range for 21 seconds. It's on a 120-second cooldown, so pretty lengthy period of time before you can pop it again. Over the course of a long domination game, though, you can definitely get several good uses out of this. Another good synergy spell with the Skull Crushers or Heralds, Chaos Knights, Minotaurs, units of that nature. I've noticed that Slaughter Brutes, you can pop it on infantry where it also helps out a little bit, but he does not support SEs very well. The only ability that he has that supports SEs is Blood Sacrifice, which can be very punishing. It does a lot of damage to him personally, and I find that the Bloodspeaker's better off on horseback, and having that small HP pool to draw from with Blood Sacrifice, even if you are mitigating the damage with the Locus of Abjuration from the Blood Reaper, still, I don't really know. It just doesn't seem to work out very well for the Bloodspeaker overall. Usually not something I bring, but is situationally useful. Gruesome Display is alright. -5 melee attack, -4 leadership. Murderous Exhortations is the other ability that he has that is interesting, but I just don't find it to be very effective. It just doesn't seem to do a tremendous amount of damage. 25 to 50 damage per second, -8 leadership, 35-meter effect range, 20-second duration, and 120-second cooldown, 3 uses on it. And I just don't know what it does best against. I've tested it against cavalry, monstrous infantry, all types of units, and it just... I don't know if it's bugged or if it really is just not that good, but I don't like using this ability. You have to put him in harm's way in order to use it, and he just doesn't seem to get much out of it. Maybe stacked with the minus leadership from Gruesome Display, you can get some, like, leadership breaks, because, I mean, -8 leadership is pretty juicy. Pairing that with the -4 from Gruesome Display can maybe get you over the top to maybe cause, like, leadership breaks and route positions of enemies that otherwise wouldn't be running. But in terms of the actual damage it does, very underwhelming for me. Honestly, you're probably better off without it. And then you just bring the other abilities he's got. He does have Vial of Troll Blood and Icon of Endless War. Icon of Endless War gives him, and him alone, 8 leadership and perfect vigor. You know, vigor -1 vigor per second while in melee, which is really the only place that vigor is, like, truly reduced, is in combat anyways. So if mostly the Blood Speaker is going to be running around trying to just pop the buff spells and provide the debuffs around him. He's not going to be in combat if you can help it, just because, you know, for a Lord on the Khorne roster, he's terrible. For other support Lords, he's alright. You just don't want him to be taking a bunch of damage, because Khorne struggles horrendously when their Lord is dead, so it's odd. He's very difficult to use. Maybe somebody else will unlock his full potential and we might see him a little more. As of now, though, I'm just going to keep him in C tier. I think that there are just better things you could be doing. You could just bring Skull Taker in most of the matchups as well, where I think the Blood Speaker works okay anyways. And Skull Taker just does more with less and requires a little bit less babysitting, because Skull Taker is so competent in melee combat. So I think that's going to be enough for this guy. Vial of Troll Blood is just an item that gives him Unbreakable for 73 seconds, which is, you know, kind of cute. I don't really know what it's going to do for you, because if he's needing to pop that, he's in a pretty bad spot. And he's probably just going to outright die anyways, and even if he survives through to the end, he's probably going to be routing off the battlefield after that, and I don't know. It just isn't super great. I had high hopes for this guy. We'll see maybe later down the line, after some more testing and synergizing efforts, if we can make him a little bit better. Moving on to Arbol. Arbol is a B tier Lord. He's definitely viable. He is a lot like Valkia in that he is a very dedicated combat Lord with some good infantry killing potential. He does have the explosion. What is it called again? Let me check real quick. The Fury of the Blood God. Pretty powerful, honestly. I've had some pretty good success with using Arbol to just run in and out of combat, popping Fury of the Blood God over and over again to do damage to infantry units. It's on 120-second cooldown, which is quite a while, but it's got a pretty good radius on that. You pop this on top of something that's, you know, fairly elite, you can do some pretty significant damage to those guys, and it's excellent against cavalry. Another really good area to use it in is if cavalry get blobbed up on Arbol. He just absolutely dominates them with this this particular ability. It does nasty damage to them. Very good AP on it. 36 damage, 66% of that being the AP. You'd be surprised how quickly he'll rack up value. I've had games where he's gotten near 3,000 value, mostly going in, beating up on some SEs that he can get after popping Fury of the Blood God were applicable. Eye of Khorne is also really nice, because you can execute something that's at less than 20% HP. It cannot be a Lord or Hero, which is the only thing that holds Arbol back from being like an A-tier character, I think. Because Wan Bo has that ability. Wan Bo doesn't get a lot of play, but, you know, similar, like, Prospect. It's just reversed for Arbol and Wan Bo. Wan Bo can only do it to Lords and Heroes, I believe. And Arbol being able to execute a unit in your opponent's army means that he's very good at killing SEs. You just like whittle down like the Shredder of Lestria or Stegodons or Giants or whatever big monster you weren't necessarily like uber prepared for. Whittle it down to about 20%, pop it, blow it up, and you get a spawn summon out of it as well. And the spawn summon is okay. It can get you 300-400 value, even more in a really good case scenario, which is rare, but, you know, it's still something. Just a little bit of extra. It's a very powerful ability, and probably what gets him up above the Blood Speaker in my experience. Arbol can struggle. He doesn't have a shield. He's got great armor, but he's really reliant on the 25% missile resistance from being on the Fleshhound to survive missile fire, which means AP missiles are a pretty serious counter to this guy. Luckily, he is very fast, and he's on the Fleshhound mount. Fleshhounds are very maneuverable, and you can definitely just have him run circles around your enemy's army with the 95 speed. And he's on foot, so he has cap weight, unlike Valkia. He is more expensive than Valkia, though, and the reason for that is just, you know, his abilities are quite costly. The other two that I haven't talked about yet, Destroyer and Thirst for Challenge. I'm not a huge fan of Destroyer of Khorne. It's okay if you can get it charged up. You can do that with Fury the Blood God being activated at the right time to get him a bunch of kills in a blob. It's a little situational, though. I'd just cut that and save the 200 gold. Thirst for Challenge, though, I really like. Usually these abilities that charge based on the number of enemies within range are pretty bad because you don't want to be super surrounded. But Arbol being surrounded by infantry gets him the extra, like, 20 melee defense. And this, in Thirst for Challenge, charges very aggressively. So if you're being surrounded by, like, 50, 75 enemy models, which is, you know, like, one infantry unit, it's basically at full charge or near it. And then you can just benefit from the extra armor-piercing damage he has. He gets the, most importantly, the extra melee defense, because his melee defense is pretty low at 45, naturally. Thirst for Challenge gets him up to about 65, and then he's got very good melee attack already. So just that little extra bit of weapon strength can really push him into being quite nasty, even in what your opponent might otherwise think is a disadvantageous position for him. Arbol's pretty easy to support with friendly units as well. Being ground-based, he's not having to play as cagey of a game as Valkia does in some matchups. Because Valkia, she may have the same speed profile, but she is a flying unit, and when she lands, her foot speed is atrocious. It's like down in the 40s, I believe. So Arbol is just always as fast as it says he is. Valkia is, you know, deceptive in that regard. He's got a little bit of extra HP on him as well. And, I don't know. Very similar utility tool. But yeah. Pretty decent, all-around good lord. Definitely one you'll see used as a little bit of a mix-up. You won't see him all the time. You'll see him less than Skulltaker, certainly a lot less than Valkia. Valkia is still the absolute ruler of the Khorne Lord select screen. Not really surprising. She has always been a great Lord option, and she still is. I was a little worried maybe that the other Lords would be so much stronger than her, she wouldn't ever get any play, but I think that those fears have been allayed now that we've actually got our hands on the new stuff. So, we're going to move on to the heroes. We'll do the legendary heroes, and then we'll talk about the Blood Reaper, because I'm very excited to talk about these guys. They're interesting little units now. So, Scylla. Scylla Anthengrim is surprisingly good. I did not think that I was going to find this unit to be very useful, personally. I thought Scylla was going to be kind of bad. When I saw details on the stats and the weapon strength spread, you know, I thought, okay, this is just, like, kind of a mid-tier monster unit. Why is he 2,100 gold with all of his abilities? And he is quite costly with the abilities that you do want to bring. The kit I like to bring him with is 1,900. Really, the only thing I cut is Crimson Juggernaut. But, I don't know, it's just something about Scylla. Scylla has really good attack animations, and actually has pretty decent mass. It says it's only 1,800 mass, but it feels very deceptive for that to be the case, because I've seen Scylla push through, like, masses of infantry without really struggling all that badly. I'm not sure why that is exactly, but Scylla does a very good job of getting in and out of fights, and is able to take full advantage of being an unbreakable 65-speed monster SE. Serpentine Tail is a much better Mortis engine than I thought. I've seen it put in some pretty good use in matchups where your opponent is going to be going with lots of infantry. It's also decent against cavalry. It's only a 10-meter effect radius, but, you know, that's fine for what it does. He's also got Kill for Khorne, which is another really good area of effect ability. It does also Rampage for 15 seconds, so if you know, love Scarbrand, but hate how big and obnoxious of a target he represents and is just able to be dealt with by any missile unit in the game, Scylla's much smaller, has a Rampage, also does damage when he activates that Rampage. 15-meter radius, you can actually stack up the Fury of the Blood God and Kill for Khorne on top of one another and do some comical amounts of damage with Arbol and Scylla together. Probably one of the better pairings that Scylla has in terms of options, because Scylla can help Arbol, and Arbol can help Scylla pretty well. Brass Collar, it's pretty easy to get kills on this guy because of his Rampage Explosion and Serpentine Tail. So Brass Collar charges up pretty aggressively too, maximum effect at 100 kills. Which gives him 20% damage resistance and an extra 15 spell resistance, so gets up to Fleshhound levels of, you know, like, stacking invulnerabilities to damage. You know, nobody is going to be sniping Scylla in the mid-game with spells if you've got the Brass Collar on him. It's going to be hard to shoot him down with missiles, so you kind of have to engage him in melee combat, where, you know, his melee defense will let him down in one-on-one fights against SEs. You just have to keep him out of that, though. And having 65 speed and Unbreakable means he's not ever going to be in a position where you can't at least try and save him. He can either run away, or you can bring up units to just support him while he stands there and gets the absolute crap kicked out of him, and attracts a ton of attention. So I don't think that he is an amazing unit. I think he's not even best used in the Khorne, on the Khorne roster. I think that Warriors of Chaos is where he's going to shine the most, where he can get a little bit of healing support from some of the characters there. But even without healing and other support elements, I think Scylla is very solid. Shockingly so, for what I was perceiving to probably end up being the weakest unit, but very much not so. In fact, I think we're probably gonna be talking about the weakest unit right now. In fact, I think that Scar Bloodwrath is probably the weakest tool that Khorne got. He's not useless. There are definitely matchups where he can be effective. I think that Chaos Dwarves and the Dowie matchup are probably where you see him brought. The issue with Scar is that he's just so slow. He's only, 46 speed for a foot character is really nice, but that is also just a waddler of a SE for 1750 when you cut some of his abilities. 1400 is probably a little bit better, but Inevitable Horror and Scaramore's Butchers are both pretty good abilities. Scaramore's Butchers especially so, because it sunders armor and a radius around him, so you can stick him with some, like lower tier infantry and really watch them perform quite well. He can do a really good job of buffing up Forsaken and Chaos dual weapons. Skull Reapers like to hang around Scar because they have a pretty comparable foot speed. Scar is faster overall, but you know, he is pretty fine. It's just that I think of the like heroes and lords that you've gotten, he synergizes and does the least to help Khorne across the battlefield out of all of these guys. He just doesn't bring anything spectacular to the table other than his good combat stats. And as I've been saying, outside of the Blood Speaker, everything Lord and hero-wise for Khorne is already a really good fighter, so is it really that special to have this guy here? He's whatever. He's just forgettable. I've tried him in a bunch of matchups. I've been very happy with his combat performance, but he just gets kited out oftentimes. By opponents. Nobody wants to engage this guy, and if you don't engage with him, he can't do anything. So I've got him down in D tier for now. He is much better against dwarves and chaos dwarves, where he can very happily go in and fight and just profit immensely from being in scenarios where his pretty bad foot speed isn't going to hinder him nearly as much at catching enemy units. Another thing to talk about, Blood Tally, which is the incoming healing modifier passive that he has. It works very odd. If he's not actively killing units, then this is going to reduce, and the charge that you've acquired over the course of a game will deteriorate back down to 0%, which really sucks. It's not fun to watch that happen. I don't know why they put a timer on this ability to make it work that way, because his foot speed is so low. He's gonna lose the charge on that, and then Bloodborne is only a 20% heal, which really isn't all that amazing. It's not bad, but I've seen this Bloodborne ability get activated while he's just getting beat up in combat, and then he routs and his heal goes off, but then he just gets chased away, and he doesn't even get a chance to get back in the fight. It's very obnoxious. You know, maybe removing that and just making it so that his healing or his kill count and the intensity of this Blood Tally ability never is reduced might make him a little bit better, because then people are trying to avoid him at all costs. They have to juggle the decision making of, do I go for a kill on this guy? Do I just shoot him dead? How do I deal with that Bloodborne ability popping? Because then he'd be a little harder to ignore, I think. As it stands, he's just whatever. You can kill him if you want to. You can not kill him if you want. No matter what you do, he's not going to be doing a whole lot. Alright, enough about Scar. Let's talk about Blood Reapers. Blood Reapers are a lot better now. They are a little more expensive, but they got some great items as the trade-off, and they're quite cheap on foot. Like, you can bring them for less than an Exalted Hero on foot, and less than Cultists. Cultists, obviously have the Summon, which is very powerful. And people might scoff at the idea of Blood Reapers being any good. You look at them, and you're like, okay, they got 4,000 HP, they got 40 armor, they've got pretty low leadership. Their foot speed is fine at 46, not amazing, it's the same as Scar, but, you don't have to pay the premium of bringing Scar Bloodwrath with these guys. For $850, you can bring their most powerful item, which is the Bloody Shackle, which is a 48% heal, which is just absolutely bonkers. It's one of the best campaign items, and, it being in multiplayer just for 150 gold is pretty nuts. These guys functionally have 5,800 HP when you factor in the healing from the Bloody Shackle. That's pretty deceptive on its own, and can definitely put opponents on the back foot when you send these guys into the front line just to grind through infantry. They're very good at killing enemy infantry, chaff included. They do have low armor. They can be a little squishy, but Bloody Shackle being popped on them just makes all of that go away. And then you actually have to dedicate attention to killing these guys, because you can't just sit back and watch them slowly get ground down by cheapo infantry. Now they can get through the enemy infantry and get on top of your opponent's like foot characters and do a lot of damage to them, because they do have a great bonus versus infantry of 20. These guys are absolute nightmares for foot-based characters, which you do see not a lot, but a decent amount. And there are definitely matchups where you see more foot characters than in others, and these guys are really good to bring there. They're really good on the Juggernauts as well. Bringing these guys on Juggernauts, their cost goes up to 1,200 with Bloody Shackle. But all of the same rules apply, and then they've also got the 70 speed, since Juggernaut mounts across the board, even on Skull Crushers and stuff, are now much faster. You can actually catch stuff, and they get an extra weapon strength, they get tons of armor. They're very annoying. This is a unit that I'm going to be very interested to see people play around with, and I think people will find them to be very nice units if they just use them properly. Now, another thing that they've got Locus of Abjuration, still not a very good activatable ability. I just don't know what the point of this is. Khorne has already got pretty good spell resistance to begin with, and having this be activatable helps you against, like, Final Transmutation and stuff like that, but most of the time people are going to be bringing debuff spells against Khorne instead of relying on damage spells, so Locust doesn't really help against those. It's kind of pointless. I wish this was just a flat passive that gave, like, 25% extra spell resistance. That would make it pretty good. It wouldn't be, like, broken, I don't think, even then, but it would give these guys a little bit more to do. But the real breadwinner, and an item that I think people are sleeping on, is the Eternal Blade. 40 melee attack, it lasts for 21 seconds, it does have a cooldown of 120 seconds, so it's a pretty long duration between uses, but 50% more weapon strength on these guys with the 40 melee attack. They are going to absolutely obliterate whatever they are in combat with if they catch it and they have this active. So you can do some pretty sick little, like, combos where you bring, like, Valkia, a Blood Reaper on the Juggernaut with all of the items, and then have Karanak in reserve to come out and catch, like, super expensive lords, and just absolutely dominate them. Put them in the trash can in no time flat with all of those guys focusing their efforts on them. Not like a super common situation, but is very situationally useful, I have found. Just an underrated item. I think the best kit, if you're gonna bring Eternal Blade, is to keep them on foot. And then you've got Bloody Shackle, Eternal Blade, and they just run around the battlefield, and they just beat up on everything, you know? And if your opponent tries to land on them with a large target, where the bonus versus infantry doesn't really come into full play, or if you go up against a foot-based character, you pop Eternal Blade. If you take damage, you pop Bloody Shackle, and these guys fight for forever. They just beat up on whatever comes into their path. I've seen them beat the hell out of Kugath, even. Which is pretty hilarious. I really want to experiment more with these guys, but my initial reactions and, like, thoughts on them is that they're very good. They are very weak to, you know, like, magic damage, obviously. And they can be squishy in certain scenarios, but definitely a unit with some niche applications that I think people should look into taking advantage of. Alright. We're going to be getting into the units now. Khorne got some good units. They got some not good, so good units. And we'll just go ahead and go through those. We'll start with the infantry. Just because they make up the bulk of the DLC stuff. Khorne Gores, S tier. Easy peasy. This is a great unit. Like, in isolation, it's an S tier unit. But on Khorne, they get pushed to another level because they just provide a little bit of anti-large that Khorne was really kind of lacking. Like, Khorne had Minotaurs, and Skull Crushers were pretty bad before this patch. Skull Crushers are a bit better now. Nothing insane, but Khorne Gores just give you a tool that cannot be beat. They are really quick on foot, 42 speed with Primal Fury active. They've got decent weapon strength. As long as they've got Frenzy and Primal Fury up, they've got 33 melee attack, I believe. Let me take a look at that. Yeah, 33 melee attack when they've got both of those passives active. They've got 60 armor, 62 leadership, pretty decent weapon strength with a big bonus versus large of 18. So even if they do lose Frenzy and Primal Fury when they're fighting a large target, they still have the bonus versus large to fall back on to do excellent damage. And they've got 20 charge bonus. 20 charge bonus is pretty fat on an infantry unit. And they just put a lot of pressure on your opponent, and more than anything, that's what makes them good. And that's why they're so good on the Khorne roster. Also excellent on the Beastmen roster. But, you know, Beastmen are strong in general and have other options for the marked Gores that, you know, they can fall back on. The Khorne Gores for 725, amazing unit. I don't think they're broken or anything, and I think they're in a pretty good spot, you know. They're a little bit cheaper than Warriors, and they're very weak to missile play. And yeah, they can be handled effectively, but you have to tech for them. I think it's good to mix 2 or 3 of them into your army. That's a pretty solid number of them in a lot of matchups. There are ones where they're not good at all, like Wood Elves, I think, is a matchup where I don't find Khorne Gores to be useful in the least. They don't have the speed to catch Glade Riders. They get shot to death by Wood Elf Archer play. So there are times where they're not going to be very good, but most of the time they're going to be the perfect pressure piece to push in. You can pull lots of units through them also and get like cavalry and SEs like caught up on the halberd attacks these guys have. And yeah, they're awesome. I can't gush enough about them, so I'm just going to stop now. We'll get on to the other units. So, Bloodwake Berserkers, the Arawar Wrathmongers, excellent unit. They sunder armor, they've got magical attacks and flaming attacks, like all the goodies in the world on that that profile there. They're immune to flanking. Even before, you know what, honestly, I played a little bit before the Wrathmongers got the immune to flanking. And even then, and when there was the weapon strength bug going on, they were paying for themselves pretty capably even then. Just the fact that it's 32 models with good foot speed and, you know, like decent armor values. 80 armor is no joke. I mean, it's not as much as, you know, the other units on Khorne's roster, but more than most. They've got, the ROR has 95 leadership as well, which is pretty crazy. They blow up on death, which does damage around them as well, meaning they can shred any like infantry unit that you send them into when they're low on HP. This is a great ROR. They're very powerful, very capable fighters. They beat just about anything they run into. The things that they struggle most against are single entities. If they surround a single entity, then they're a nightmare because they've got okay mass for an infantry-sized unit at 450. They can lock SEs in place, but stuff like dragons, mammoths, thunder tusks, stonehorns, units of that caliber that are dedicated anti-infantry can really fuck these guys up. They can really struggle there. But otherwise, they're amazing. They will beat anything that they run into. Your opponent is going to have to stay away from them and shoot them with missiles. They can be dealt with that way, but it's pretty difficult. And then when you you're adding in the fact that there's like Khorne and bloodletters and just marauders and fleshhounds and furies just swarming all over the field, it can become very overwhelming, and that's why Khorne has improved so much, is because before Khorne played not passively, but like a very cagey split pushing type of game, and now you can just absolutely just terrify your opponent from end to end of the battlefield with your tools. You've got the speed to match up against any faction at this point. You've got answers for, you know, a variety of targets now. You're not just relying on the same old units anymore. You can really mix it up as Khorne now, which is where I thought Khorne shined to begin with, but did have a little bit of trouble just because of some of the holes in the roster, but most of the DLC stuff has addressed that. And I think you're going to be seeing more and more players gravitate towards playing Khorne as they realize just how capable they are. Regular Wrathmongers, there are beats here. They're just not as good as the Bloodwake Berserkers, but they are still very strong. You know, they don't have the armor sundering, they don't have the magic attacks, they don't have Bloodstorm, which is the explosion on death. They don't sunder armor either. But just having 60 melee attack and 50 melee defense with 80 weapon strength, with, you know, and 54 of that being armor piercing. 44 charge bonus. Let's not forget talking about charge bonus, which is very important, and especially good on units like Wrathmongers and Skull Crushers and stuff. Great. Good unit. Very solid. Something that you'll see mixed into quite a few Khornate armies. Skull Reapers. Skull Reapers are another B tier unit. I'm pretty shocked. They are not perfect. They suffer pretty badly against missile play. They're slower than the Wrathmongers are with 35 speed. They're actually even slower than Bloodletters, but they have amazing stats in their own right. And they've got magical attacks, so Skull Reapers are actually your mainstay infantry against demonic factions, and they've got a charge bonus of 40 also. So you can mix in a Skull Reaper against quite a few factions and have some serious success with. You don't want to rely on them too much outside of fighting like Demons of Chaos, or probably Slaanesh. Slaanesh is probably where you'll want to bring a lot of Skull Reapers as well. But yeah, they're really cool. 60 models as opposed to 100, but they've got 9,400 HP, which is pretty nuts, honestly, on 60 models for an infantry unit. And yeah, I mean they're like depth guard basically, like slightly less durable depth guard. I think they're even the same price if I'm not mistaken. Let me actually check that. Yeah, they're the same price as depth guard. They've even got better stats than the depth guard do. More HP, most importantly. Better charge bonus, better everything except for weapon strength, which is the same, slightly slower and less armor. That's really the only difference. Skull Reapers are pretty awesome. Very dependable unit that you won't see in every matchup. Again, comes with caveats. Using it in the proper situation is key to getting these guys to perform, but I think they're very solid, and you will see them, you know, on occasion. Slaughter Guard. They're a C-tier unit. All of the same problems that other elite infantry halberd units have applies to these guys. They're slow as sin. Oh my goodness. 28 speed. Just like Chaos Warrior halberds. You know, Chaos Warrior halberds, if they fight stuff, just dominate them, and they do tons of damage. Slaughter Guard are quite literally double the cost of a Chaos Warrior halberd. They've got 95 leadership. They do have unyielding assault, which means they can't have their melee attack reduced, which is cool. They've got 26 bonus versus large, good weapon strength. They've even got an okay charge bonus of 16 with Frenzy active that goes up to 20. They're a great unit if they're fighting things because they just destroy everything that they come in contact with, but they are so slow. If you are going up against a faction with any kind of AP missiles, the Slaughter Guard are basically useless, and then it's just a big sad for you. So I'm putting them in C tier, not because they're terrible or anything, but just because they're going to be very situational. Vampire counts and, you know, maybe a handful of other matchups are going to be where you see these guys, and they will do really well there. Having used them against vampire counts, they are an absolute monster of a unit in that matchup, because vampires cannot touch these guys without getting shredded, and, you know, vampires completely lack missiles, so they can be quite difficult to deal with. Breath attacks, though, from dragons and stuff can mess them up. You just gotta be very cagey with them, and you gotta have them positioned well to make the most use out of them. Moving on to Blood Beasts. Blood Beasts are an A tier unit. Borderline S tier. They're 1100 and they just have good stats. They are exactly what Khorne needed. They're everything that Spawn of Khorne wish they were and aren't. They've got 23 extra speed over Spawn. They've got better melee attack and melee defense. A little bit of weapon strength difference there. Spawn do have more weapon strength, but the Blood Beasts have a better AP split, which just makes them better overall, and they have more charge bonus. You know, the only thing they don't have is Unbreakable, but they've got 75 leadership, which is better than Minotaurs of Khorne, actually. So these guys for 1100 are a really good unit. They're very solid. Very squishy to missile play because they only have 40 armor. And, yeah, I don't know, man. Fun stuff. They're a fun unit. Pretty quick. They synergize really well with the rest of the aggressive units on the roster now. That's where they shine the most. They're good again. They're, you know, just better Rat Ogres, and Rat Ogres are some of the more cost-efficient monstrous infantry in the game, and as above, so below, Blood Beasts do a very similar thing and do it very well, so love them to death. Not much to say there. I think a lot of other people have talked about them ad nauseum. Not going to spend too much time talking about them beyond just saying, yeah, people are pretty damn right about them. Very good unit, almost S tier. The Hellforged Bellower is broken. I hesitate to put Khorngors in S tier just because the Hellforged Bellower is even higher up. The Hellforged Bellower is just a stupid unit. I don't know what CA was thinking with this. I've talked about it a bunch personally. If you go and look at its stats, like, it gets benefits that other RORs just simply don't. Like, most ROR units have, like, 10 extra melee attack, 10 extra melee defense, and the extra leadership. This thing not only gets that, but it's actually got 20 extra melee attack, 14 more melee defense, 15 more charge bonus, and its missile projectile is just absolutely atrocious in terms of its strength. I mean, just obliterates everything. If this thing is way too good, even with the price increase that it got, I think it should stay banned in most tournaments. I think it's dumb. I think it does too much. I don't like units that go from being... I just don't like units that are anti-everything. That's just boring. That's not what I want. I want there to be trade-offs in unit performance so that units specialize a little bit, you know, and then actual generalist units like Wrathmongers have a little bit of room to shine by actually being exactly what they are. Whereas the Hellforged Bellowers can just beat everything and do it really easily. You know, I mean, you really have to commit a lot to taking this thing out. It draws you into combat, it forces engagements in a really nauseatingly toxic way, in my opinion. The way that I think it should be balanced is they really should just take the vortex damage off of this thing, and I think it would be pretty fine where it is. Yeah. Oh, and it's got the Hellraiser ability also, which is a vortex when it's riding through units. So not only does it have the vortex damage on its 5 missiles that it fires, as opposed to a regular skull cannon, which has the one vortex on one missile. It also does vortex damage in melee combat. It does have a cooldown on this thing, and it's not always active, but it's just insult to injury for how strong everything else about it is. I'd love to see them just make it so that this is like a pretty niche unit to bring. Like, you just remove the vortex damage, and then it's really still going to be excellent at shooting down stuff like the Changebringers, Angels of Decay, Longma Riders. Like, it should be an anti-air unit. Like, I really like it in that role. That's when I bring it, is when I'm going up against factions that have, like, air units, and I mostly just use it in that role, and it does pretty nicely. Just am baffled by why they gave it the vortex damage on the missiles, because it's just so strong. I mean, this thing will, two-shot most infantry units in the game, and that just isn't fun. It skews the matchups horrendously, so they need to keep it banned for now, and they need to change the way it works. IMO. Done talking about that now. We'll move on to the Slaughter Brute. Slaughter Brute's fine. It's, a big monster. All of the same problems apply to this as to Mutaliths and other ground-based monster-type units. Slaughter Brute's not bad, though. It's a fun unit. I love to play around with this thing, and I've had some success with it, but not in like a tournament setting. The Runes of Binding is really nice, and I think it synergizes really well with Valkia or Skulltaker. Because, Valkia and Skulltaker are pretty hard to snipe. So this thing will fight to the bitter end. And this is Khorne's distraction Khorne effects. If you don't kill it, it's going to run your front line over, terror out everything, and just be an absolute nightmare to deal with. But, if you focus too hard on shooting it down, then you're probably going to get the rest of your army flattened while you're trying to kill this thing. I have most of the games where I bring this, that's what ends up happening, is people just focus this thing down and shoot it into oblivion, but then the rest of their army is struggling to maintain battlefield control, because it being unbreakable, with 9,800 HP, and it's got 25% missile resist and 70 armor, which isn't bad. I mean, this thing can be very disruptive and annoying, so... underrated. I don't agree with people saying that it's just like an absolute dog water unit. No, it's fine. It's just a big monster, and it's got big monster problems, So that's really about all I have to say about these units. That's the all the new stuff there for you. Definitely got to screenshot this. And yeah, leave any comments you guys have down below. Let me know what y'all think. I am very curious to see what other people have to say about this, because I do feel like there are going to be some very strong opinions disagreeing with me on some of this. But overall, Khorne got a lot of really great tools that synergize very well with the intended playstyle of Khorne, and has definitely pushed them up a notch. I don't think Khorne is unstoppable, like some people are, claiming. Khorne has the same problems it always has in a lot of regards. No magic is very painful. I don't care who you are, not having access to magic is definitely a handicap in this game, where it is one of the biggest force multipliers available to an army. Not having any access to that is really annoying and puts them at a disadvantage all the time. And I think that Khorne is in a pretty balanced state, all things considered. I mean, if you go to the Total Tavern website, we'll show it off here. I mean, they're literally at a 50% win rate. In fact, losing just a little bit more than they're winning right now. And I don't know how people are losing to dwarves with Khorne, because that is the most winnable matchup of all time. Norska makes sense. Grand Cathay sometimes. It depends on who your opponent is. Grand Cathay can be a tricky faction in general just because you don't see them a lot, but all things being equal, this is, I think this is a pretty reflective state of affairs for Khorne. They dominate some factions where it's just incredibly difficult for those factions to do anything to Khorne. But then in others, it's very even. There's a lot of counterplay. There's lots of opportunities for both factions to come in and mix things up and do something different and really throw each other off. So we'll see how it plays out over the course of the whole season, but Khorne is not Slaanesh. Slaanesh is broken. Just a faction that CA has not been able to effectively balance at any point in the lifespan of this game, unfortunately. They've either been terrible or they've been ridiculous, and they're back to being ridiculous right now, so we'll see about it in the future. But yeah, that's going to be it, guys. Hope y'all enjoyed. Take care. And I'll see y'all next time. Peace.